Cadets thought he just wheeled gas carts, until the storm obeyed his hands. After the cadets filed out. After the instructors turned off the HUDs. After the tech room lights flicked to red and the fans spun into a low mechanical hum. That's when the man showed up. Coveralls, steel toes. A work badge that only read, E. Harlan Systems. No rank, no unit history. Just an access card that somehow opened every locked door in Bay 4. He didn't speak much. Didn't hang around the break room. Moved slow but steady, like someone who'd already survived the fast part of life. Most cadets didn't know his name. To them, he was just Sim Fuel Guy, the one who wheeled the nitrogen carts, cleaned out the filters, and recalibrated the motion seats when the hydraulics groaned. But Mason noticed him. Not at first, just occasionally, after Sim's shutdowns, when he'd return to the flight deck to grab something and catch the man standing motionless in front of Bay 4's master screen, watching a storm sim replay in silence, the same one every time. A Gulf squall with zero visibility, heavy updraft. Instruments crashing mid-descent. Every cadet failed it. Every time. And yet, each morning after, the system would be tuned to perfect latency, smoothed out like someone had manually overridden the physics and put it back into reality. Only nobody had access, except Harlan. "Why is that old guy always hovering around the Gulf squall run?" one recruit asked during chow. Another shrugged. "He probably loads the weather packs or something." Mason shook his head. "He doesn't watch. He tracks." That night, after final sim lockout, Mason doubled back, pretended to forget his training tablet, slipped into the maintenance wing and waited in the observation booth above Bay 4. Harlan was already there. No cart, no gear, just standing behind the primary console, hands resting on the edge of the panel like a man leaning on the cockpit of something long gone. The storm sim was already playing. Again. Same sequence. Same altitude bleed. Same instrument failures. But this time, Mason noticed something new. Harlan's right hand moved slightly, thumb tapping once against his ring finger. 3 seconds later, the simulated stall broke, just before the instructor set recovery window. Nobody was flying the sim. But someone still remembered how to land it, and Mason started to understand. The system wasn't being tuned to perfection. It was being returned to it. It didn't make sense. No one could override sim physics mid-run, not without admin credentials. And even then, the system flagged every deviation. There were no logs, no adjustments. Just subtle shifts in motion response, like someone had tuned the storm to match something not in the manual. Mason checked the instructor terminal logs the next day. Bay 4 had no pilot input after 2200, but the telemetry showed a clean approach path during the last run. Smooth, decisive, identical to a real-world Gulf airstrip configuration, but not the one in the scenario file. He printed the trace overlay, compared it to textbook recovery arcs, didn't match any of them. What it did match, almost perfectly, was a blacked-out diagram he found in a forgotten PDF appendix, tucked inside an old archived Navy briefing on offshore medical evac flights. There was no mission name, no incident report, just a timestamp, 3:37 Zulu, and a single weather note in red. Primary failed to return. Secondary recovered visual in window 19. Mason didn't know what that meant, but he knew who would. He waited until after hours, sat outside Bay 4 until the cleaning crews finished, and watched as Harlan came in, slow, quiet, pulling a small tool case behind him. When the old man saw Mason, he didn't stop. Just gave a single glance, the kind that measured why someone was waiting. Mason stood. "Was that you?" he asked softly. Harlan didn't answer. Didn't need to. He wheeled the cart inside. But before the door closed, he said 2 words. Window 19. That night, Mason stayed up searching every archive he could access. Not instructor logs, but old AARs, debriefs, redacted black flights, anything tagged with weather override or simlock. He found it. Offshore medevac, Gulf of Oman. Primary bird failed navigation mid-squall. Backup aircraft rerouted with no HUD, no comms, and 30 seconds of visibility. Landing was called non-viable, but it happened anyway. No pilot name listed, just a code name, Harleen. Mason whispered the word out loud. It was almost a match. Harlan. He checked the system's legacy technician log. One field had been locked since 2005. Former pilot ID, E. Harleen. It hadn't been spelled wrong. It had been covered. The man calibrating the simulator wasn't adjusting weather curves. He was reliving something no one else had survived. The first time Harlan touched the sim controls, it wasn't planned. The storm module had crashed. Full system blackout mid-run, no visuals, no telemetry, no motion. Instructors scrambled to reset Bay 4 before the next evaluation block. 5 cadets were waiting to cycle through the Gulf Squall run. No one could get the rig to reinitialize. Too much input lag, one tech muttered. Motion platform's off kilter again, another said. We need to zero it. But the override utility wasn't responding. Then someone said, Where's the old guy? He's the only one who can fix this thing. One of the staff called out across the hangar. Eddie! From the corner of the motion platform, Harlan stood, wiped his hands on a cloth, walked over, said nothing, just stepped behind the console and reached under the panel, not the main interface, but a secondary access plate most of the instructors didn't even know could open. Click, he adjusted one dial. Press 2 buttons in sequence. The screen flashed. The sim reinitialized, storm loaded, wind shear spinning, clean and perfect. Your magic, man, one of the cadets said, chuckling. But Instructor Voss didn't laugh. She narrowed her eyes. You fly? She asked, watching his hands. Harlan looked at her. Not surprised, not coy. Just tired. Used to. What bird? He looked toward the sim cabin. Doesn't matter. She paused, then motioned toward the now idling seat. You ever flown this one? No. Want to? He didn't answer. But he stepped in anyway. No harness. No headset. Just muscle memory. The sim powered up. No one spoke. Voss loaded the squall file. Maxed the weather. Cut the HUD. Pulled the avionics offline. Full blackout. The cabin door hissed closed behind him. Outside, they watched the data roll in. Altitude held. Pitch trimmed manually. Wind correction came early, like he knew where the burst would break. Then, just before final descent, something happened. He cut throttle. Drifted down. Almost hovering. And landed. No alerts. No tremors. Just one clean touchdown. The simulator's data feed scrolled a single line. Weather deviation override. Human corrected. No sim had ever produced that response before. One cadet finally asked, How'd he do that? Instructor Voss didn't answer. She was staring at the call sign he'd entered before the run. Not Harlan. Just Harleen. The simulator logged every flight. Always had. Time code. Pilot name. Module data. Instructor grading notes. Even the tilt angle of the motion platform, down to tenths of a degree. But not this one. When Mason pulled the records the next morning, Bay 4 showed nothing. No pilot ID. No completion flag. Just a line of empty space between 2 logged cadet attempts. A gap in the data. Timestamped between 2:12 and 2:21. 9 minutes. Gone. He asked the systems officer if there had been a glitch. Everything's running clean, the officer replied. Bay 4's logs look normal. Mason pulled the back-end log index. There it was. A single override entry, untagged, with no attached sim account. Just a call sign, Harleen. And a note. Manual run. Weather lock disengaged. He showed it to Instructor Voss. She stared at the screen for a long time. Then opened her personal archive. A locked folder buried under flight instruction notes. Inside, one image. Black and white, blurred slightly. A medevac bird hovering above a coastal airstrip, almost ghost-like in a curtain of storm. No tail number. No visible pilot. Just coordinates scribbled in the corner. 27.0017 degrees north, 56.2044 degrees east, Gulf of Oman. Mason looked at her. That's him, isn't it? She nodded. They pulled the mission from the logs, whole crew listed as non-returned. But he came back. She didn't answer. Just tapped the top corner of the photo. A symbol, almost too faint to see, embossed into the margin. An hourglass flanked by wings. It wasn't a patch. It was a mark. Legacy pilots called it the last vector. Used once, when a pilot took a flight path that had no return plan, but somehow landed it anyway. Those who wore it didn't speak of it, didn't explain it. They just calibrated what others forgot to measure. That night Mason returned to Bay 4. Harlan wasn't there. But someone had left a folded card on the instructor desk. Inside, a kneeboard slip, yellowed, handwritten numbers, crosswind table, manual descent altitudes, and at the bottom, circled in pencil. Window 19. Visual return not guaranteed. Trust the air. Below that, no signature. Only a call sign, sketched softly, like it had been written thousands of times in the dark. After that night, Bay 4 changed. No announcement. No policy shift. But the cadets started talking differently. They stopped calling him the sim tech, started calling him the one who flew. He didn't show up every night. Only some. And when he did, the instructors left the hangar doors open longer than usual. A kind of permission, unspoken. Cadet Mason began staying late. Sometimes just to watch. Sometimes just to listen to the way the room settled when Harlan stood behind the console. He never flew again. But once, after the system glitched during a turbulence module, Harlan stepped forward, looked at the sim's readout, and muttered a single phrase. Too late on the flare. He didn't mean to be heard. But Mason caught it. That same night, Mason walked to the far end of Bay 4, where old equipment was stored, surplus chairs, cracked sim shells, broken instruments. In the back corner, behind a pile of obsolete VR visors, he found a metal box. Rusted. Unlocked. Inside, an old flight helmet. No padding. Visor scratched beyond use. Taped to the inside was a strip of paper, brittle and yellow. On it coordinates. 27.0017 degrees north, 56.2044 degrees east. Same as the storm photo. And beneath it, a date. July 19, 1997, 3:19 Zulu. He flipped the paper over. One sentence scrawled in ink that had bled through. Didn't land where I was supposed to, just where someone needed me to. Mason folded the note. Not to keep it, to understand it. Because window 19 wasn't a number. It was a moment, a break in the storm, a breathe between systems, where instinct takes over and instruments lie. Most pilots never make it to that kind of window. Fewer return from it, and only one, as far as Mason knew, had ever landed there, and then come back to sweep the dust off a machine meant to simulate what he'd actually survived. That weekend, Mason ran the Gulf Storm sim on his own, full blackout. Manual descent. No HUD. He failed. Twice. But the third time, just before touchdown, he saw something out of the corner of the curved display. A flash. Not an error. Not code. Just a symbol. For half a second, hovering at the edge of the screen. An hourglass. Mason didn't mention the hourglass. Not at first. He didn't want it logged, explained, or turned into a patch on someone's backpack. It wasn't that kind of mark. It felt older than recognition. More like something left behind for those who could see it. Later that week, Instructor Voss pulled him aside. You've been running Bay 4 alone. Mason nodded. Why? He hesitated. Then said, I think I'm trying to understand where he went. She studied him. Not suspicious, just weighing how much to say. Did you ever ask him? I don't think he wants it asked. Voss leaned against the rail overlooking the empty sim seats. There's a reason he stayed after the mission. Why he didn't go back into the cockpit. Not just clearance. Not just orders. What then? She looked at Mason. Because that storm didn't just strip his radar. It took something else. Something only he knows. Mason didn't answer. But the next night, he returned to Bay 4 and found something new. No note. No files. Just a sealed envelope on the console. Blank on the front. Inside, a strip of sim tape. Hand-cut. Rough edges. On it, someone had drawn the outline of the hourglass, in black marker, uneven, imperfect, human. And beneath it, window 19 is never visible until you're already in it. It wasn't instruction. It was warning. But also, invitation. He took the tape and pressed it onto the inside of his helmet. Not where others could see. Just where it would sit over his right eye, just barely in view during descent. From that point on, he flew differently. Not recklessly. Not better. Just quieter. He stopped chasing perfect vectors, started listening to the machine, to the drift, to the weight. That same week, another cadet asked Mason why the old man never flew again after that first run. Because he already did, Mason said. And one landing like that, you don't try to repeat. The cadet nodded, unsure. But he looked toward Bay 4 like it was more than training now. Like it was a memory someone else had left open for them to walk through. And Mason understood something. Some symbols aren't worn on the chest. They're left behind. On glass. On sim tape. In motion curves only one person ever felt for real. It happened on a Tuesday. Bay 4 was already powered up when Mason arrived, strange, since no flight blocks were scheduled. The sim cabin door stood open. No light, no sound, just the faint smell of oil and air-dried plastic. He stepped inside. Nothing on the seat. No boots. No clipboard. But a headset rested neatly on the dash. Clean. Centered. Taped to the yoke was a folded card, same yellowing paper as before. Mason opened it slowly. This was the last one I ever needed. Window opened. Landing held. Bird intact. No name required. Signed simply, H. Mason stood there for a long time. Didn't sit down. Didn't run the sim. He just placed the card back where it was, closed the cabin door, and walked out into the empty hangar. Harlan didn't come again. No one saw the truck. No checkout badge. No farewell. Just silence, like a completed flight. Wheels down. Engines cut. And that night, for the first time, the simulator didn't run a storm cycle. No one entered Bay 4. No one needed to. It had landed. Weeks passed. Bay 4 remained on the schedule, but instructors used it less. Cadets rotated through other modules. The Gulf Storm scenario was still in the system, but no one ran it. Mason stopped flying it too. Not because he couldn't. Because it didn't feel right to land where someone else already had. Instead, he stayed after hours, calibrating motion tolerances, running diagnostics, checking systems the same way Harlan used to. Quiet work. The kind you do when no one's watching. Then one night, as he walked past the sim glass, something caught his eye. A reflection. Not his. Faint. Near the edge of the curved display. An hourglass. It wasn't there on the screen. Not drawn. Not programmed. But in the glass, caught between overhead light and curved shield, the shape returned, just for a second. He looked up. Nothing. No one behind him. But somehow, the weight stayed. He reached into his chest pocket and unfolded the kneeboard note one last time. Ran his finger over the faded pencil line that circled. Trust the air. He didn't speak. Didn't move. He just stood there, listening to the simulator hum in standby, like a bird still breathing, waiting for the next hands that would know how to guide it down. And then he walked out, leaving Bay 4 dark behind him. Door closed. System idle. But the hourglass stayed. Not etched, not drawn. Just carried.